Okay,
Oh, they got it.
hold on. Yeah, for some reason it came back on.
All right, let me try it again.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Now it's saying, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that was chaotic.
Oh, people can't hear me. Hi, Janice. Hi, Mary. We need Scott. So finally,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's in. Yes, I admitted him.
okay.
That was a
I'm here. I get kicked out for some reason.
I did
So,
too.
yeah, for some reason I got booted out and it said that someone else had signed into the account and started another meeting. So I'm not sure
Wow.
what happened there. I tried calling Grace, she didn't answer, so I'm wondering if whoever started that meeting called Grace, or maybe when I started this meeting, it booted whoever's meeting was using this account. I have no idea. I haven't heard back from Grace yet, so it's a mystery.
All right. Okay. Well, we have a quorum. It is 7:03. We'll begin our meeting. Welcome, everybody. We have a limited agenda tonight, so I'm hoping it'll be a short meeting. Beth won't be here because she's sick, and Robin, I think, is out of town. So it'll just be the three commissioners and all the other visitors. So we'll just kind of plow through this. Minutes, we do not have the minutes available because there was a snafu and Carrie needed access to the recording for the minutes, and it took a little while to get access to those. So we'll look at those minutes at the next meeting on May 12th. Next on, well, let's go over site visit follow-ups. 114 Montague Road. I think we were all there who are here tonight. So that is the outbuilding and deck project. And we decided that there were no wetlands that were jurisdictional. So that building permit would be approved.
Yeah,
Um,
Miriam, on that one. I know we're keeping a log of our site visits and as they relate to minimum, minor exempt activities. And I just wanted to circle around to that one there, just so I understand what we're tracking. Because I know when we talked about this before, that we talked about sometimes landowners want the commission to go out and make sure that there aren't wetlands that are being impacted. And I wanted to see if on this one, is this a case where the commission pulled the building permit and scheduled the site visit, knowing that it was a minor exempt activity to begin with? Or is this something where the landowner asked us to come out and to look at that to determine if there were wetlands present?
we were notified because of the building permit. The landowner did not reach out to us.
So we pull the building permit. And
We
I
don't
think-
pull the permit. We don't pull the permit. They pull
Gotcha.
the permit.
They file the permit.
We get notified
We were notified of the permit.
and we have to sign off on it.
We have to sign off on all building permits in the town.
Only ones that involve soil ground disturbance. So if you're putting siding up on your house or you're replacing windows or doing interior work or whatever, then we would not be signing off on those.
Okay, well, I know this is one for a later conversation on, as we're just reviewing our processes to see what are the most efficient way forward. But I do, in this case, I just think as we're cataloging where we're spending our site visits, it would be good to denote, where do landowners, where are they asking us to go out because they have concerns about, is there wetland impact versus ones like this that turned out to be non-jurisdictional where we didn't have there's no jurisdictional wetland close by.
Well, everybody sets, different people over time have kept the activity log a little differently. What I'm doing is I'm differentiating between a building permit, a project that comes to us as a building permit, as opposed to when somebody is asking us to review jurisdiction. So those are being characterized in one column. I have a column that characterizes whether it's an NOI, building permit, RDA, whether it's this kind of jurisdictional review or building permit. And then what I'm doing, Scott, is there's a comment section where I'm noting if it was a minor activity. And I'm also noting whether or not, even though it was a minor activity, whether we determined there were wetlands on the property. So because I think it's significant, if we're concerned about whether homeowners know where the buffer zone begins and ends, if there was absolutely no wetlands there, as opposed to we went out and we actually did delineate some wetlands, but we determined that they were outside of the buffer zone, so there was no jurisdiction. So I'm making that notation
Perfect.
so we can kind of have a little bit of nuance and granularity in how we think about these.
Great, thank you. And I noticed on the site visit form, there was something there about erosion control, and I didn't know what we were recommending regarding erosion control if there wasn't a wetland present.
Well, that's for if we were following up with an RDA where we were going back to confirm erosion controls, either for a determination of applicability or for NOI, for an order of conditions, where maybe there was a condition that we had to go back and do another site visit to review erosion controls. So that's where that would get checked off.
Gotcha. But in this case, because there is no jurisdictional wetland, because we don't have a concern, there's no requirement for any BPA or anything, or BMP rather, to be followed because there's nothing there. Okay,
However, we can still make recommendations to landowners about erosion controls, even if we don't have jurisdiction, if we think it's relevant. For example, there was a building permit that we reviewed on Locks Pond Road, where there is an intermittent stream just downhill outside of 100 feet.
hey, Miriam, I'm losing you.
Yeah, you're freezing. Looks like you and me, huh?
All right, this is when we choose, we draw lots for who's running the meeting, and I choose Mary.
Nope.
There we go. Are you
Maybe.
back? Can you hear us?
Oh, it's going to be a fun meeting.
That's what she said when she got cut off.
I know, while she's rejoining, I think I have my answers to that. And it does, I understand we can always make recommendations. I'm just making sure that they're not requirements. They're not anything that we're dictating for a site where we don't have a wetland. So I'm thinking that we should probably pull up the agenda and, oh, I see Miriam's back, maybe.
There
He's
we go.
moving. That's good.
Can't have,
Oh,
you
okay.
guys can't move the agenda without me because you don't have a quorum. So please don't.
We were gonna make all the decisions while you were gone.
Yeah.
Well, she can hear us, but she can't talk to us.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay now?
We can.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Miriam, for that.
I realized that I had too many windows. I had too many things open on my computer, and that was why the internet was giving me grief. Okay. So just the point I was making is that, we try to use these site visits as an educational opportunity, Scott, to let people know, what they can do to protect wetlands and prevent erosion. So
Yep.
it's challenging moment.
Yeah, and I said, I'm all good for that. I just wanted to make it, to me, it's just important for the commission, for as we're moving forward, that it's clear what are we doing as an educational opportunity versus what are we requiring under, as our responsibility for enforcing the bylaw or for the
Right.
Wetlands Protection Act. So it's just making a clear line on what we're doing.
Well, but there is an area where that can overlap, because even if something is outside of the buffer zones, Scott, if somebody does something that causes a point source discharge into a jurisdictional wetland, then that would be a violation. So even though we may not have a jurisdiction to require an RDA, we can educate people so that they can avoid a circumstance where there could become a violation.
Yeah, and again, I'm all for educating folks. It's just, making clear which hat we're wearing when we're making those recommendations.
But we are wearing the regulatory hat when we're giving people advice to avoid violations, because they may not understand that we have jurisdiction if there is a violation, if there is a point source discharge into a wetland.
Well, and maybe we can, I'm sure we could get into our more robust conversation around that piece, but maybe when we circle around with the data on, where we've been with building permits, where we've been with, the minor exempt activities and our recommendations, we can talk about those more in depth, but I'm good with this one.
If you take a look at, where our jurisdiction begins and ends, Scott, our jurisdiction, I don't know, Janice, do you want to explain this? I feel like I'm not being clear.
You mean between the bylaw and the DEP wetlands or what?
No, that if somebody,
Yeah, so officially all we could,
if somebody did an activity outside of the buffer zone, but
Yeah.
for example, they didn't use erosion controls and it led to a sediment discharge into a wetland, that would become our jurisdiction, even though the activity was outside the buffer zone.
yes, yeah. And one of the big disasters that had to do with solar panels, solar array construction in the western part of the state was a case where the actual construction was outside any 100-foot buffer or 200-foot riverfront, was uphill, and they didn't use proper erosion control, and everything went down and completely filled the wetland. And that was a giant violation. So that's the sort of thing we can only tell people what to do within the 100-foot or the riverfront or any of our jurisdiction, but there may be places where it's to their advantage to at least know that they need to be careful if they're up a slope and clearing and things might wash down into them.
Right. So
Yeah, and that
again,
makes-
we can't order them, but we can be advisory with, coming from the place that we want to avoid
Yeah.
enforcement situations.
Yeah, and that all makes sense to me. I think, again, advising and educating folks is appropriate. And I mean, in my mind, there's a big difference between a big solar project, with clear cutting on a slope versus installing some sonotubes for a porch addition to your house. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so the next site visit Mary and I were at, and this is at 120 Cushman Road, where the property is right across the street from Atkins Reservoir. It's a very steep driveway. Right now it's paved with asphalt, and the end of the asphalt pavement currently is exactly 100 feet from where we determined the bank was of Atkins Reservoir. There's also a storm drain about 35 feet from the end of the driveway that goes under Cushman Road and then empties out into the buffer zone area near the bank. There's a bunch of culverts like that on Cushman Road. So there were two issues with this that we looked at. One was that while technically the driveway might be 100 feet or, give or take a few inches. The positioning of the excavation equipment would clearly be within 100 feet, and it would be very difficult to guarantee that the limit of work would remain outside of the 100 feet, given how right on the line it was. So Beth's opinion was that it needed to be an RDA, and I think that would be my recommendation as well. The other issue was that this landowner also wanted to have, as part of this project, digging a new storm swale along her property to connect runoff to that storm drain. And we told her that this is all within the right of way, and that she couldn't, that we wouldn't even permit her to do that storm swale, because it's really a road maintenance issue, and the town would need to submit an RDA for that if they wanted to do that. The main reason why she wanted to do it is because she's using that as a parking area. She's parking her cars in the right of way. I'm not sure the town would be willing to create a storm swale so that somebody can use the right of way as a parking area. There were she had other parking areas that she could use. So it wasn't like that was the only place where she could park her car. Mary, do you want to add any more to that?
So she was gonna contact the highway department about seeing if they would clean that out, right?
Well, I emailed the highway department about it just to put
Okay.
them on notice so that they wouldn't go out and do it without an RDA from us, because that would be, there is no swale there. And so if they were going to create a new swale, they would need to submit an RDA.
Good.
But again, maybe we could have some discussion about it. It's a tricky situation, but during the period of construction where they're tearing out all of the asphalt, there's going to be some ground disturbance along the slope of that driveway as they're digging it out for the new pavement. And it's a really steep driveway. She said she has trouble getting up it in the winter time. So, to give you an idea of how steep it is, my concern would really be that we can't really require erosion controls without an RDA. And the construction work would involve heavy machinery and some ground disturbance within the 100 feet.
So as I understanding what you're saying, there's the activity that that is being proposed. You're saying that the ground disturbance is within the buffer zone. There are concerns over erosion, and the only way to require the erosion controls is through the
Right. We can't, if we don't do an RDA, then we can't ensure
Yeah.
that there's erosion controls.
Well, on this one, I mean, it seems to me this is more clear cut that it's within the buffer. There's a wetland that's jurisdictional to us. We need to ensure that there are erosion controls in place to protect it. So that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah. My concern, even beyond the idea that there could be that the sediment, if there was erosion, that it would go across the road and somehow get into the lake, but because there's only 35 feet from a storm drain that then would get it into the lake is really kind of the conduit, because it wouldn't take much if there was a heavy rain and the slopes weren't stabilized to get sediment going right down. She said that the water pools at the bottom of her driveway, so it wouldn't take much to get sediment going under that storm drain.
I don't have any concerns with moving forward that way.
Is that all right with you too, Mary? You agree? You have any?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then we've got do you want to have some discussion or give us some, I did talk with Beth a little bit, so I heard a little bit about the process with the site visit with DCR. I know you were there, Mary. Do you want to, I can share
Did
what
we-
Beth shared with me, or you would like to report back on it?
Did we skip the Lake Drive?
That was a longer item. I was going to get to that. Yeah. I'm just doing it out of order.
Just, so yes, Beth and I went out to look at that tree cutting plan with Andrew. We did, just for information, we did walk the site there. He showed us all of the trees and the changes that he made with the identifying more wetlands. He walked through the process that he came up with for doing that. He also showed us how they determine within the wetlands what trees would be cut. So it would be a selective cut of a small amount of trees there. And we actually looked at some of the trees. It makes sense that the trees that they want to take down there do have some disease going on in them. But they also will help clear the area to allow more sunlight in. So other varieties of hardwood trees could start to grow there. So it actually would help the site area to cut some of these trees. So we stayed quite a while and walked the whole property. So it looks like the changes that they've made, would meet all of the requirements that we needed. And it's a little less than what it was when it first came out for doing that. We also talked with Leslie to explain to her what we did and what we looked at and everything too, in that it did seem to be a compromise between the two to be able to do that.
Okay.
The other thing we talked about too is getting back to, and Don can correct me, Eric, I think, is the person that making sure we get the plans sent to us when they're first identified, not when they've
Right.
gone through the process and are already all approved, so we can make comments. So Andrew said it's not his responsibility, it's the person that's doing the trees to do that, but that he would also make sure to send us a note so that we get the plans in time to look at them and address any of the comments that we need
That would be
to
really
look
great.
at.
So
So
he'll send us an email or something?
he'll send us something when he gets them. It should come to us even prior to that, but just
Whenever
to keep
happens.
it, just to keep it in line for doing that.
Okay.
The problem had been that they kept getting the forest cutting plans to you guys after the 10-day comment period. And this way, if they're mailing them to you guys directly, you get to see a copy of it. And if you have concerns about wetlands, Andrew really did compromise. This plan has been rewritten to honor our wetland bylaw. And it does a much lighter footprint in the wetland than originally planned, where it was almost going to be a clear cut. Now it's a selective cut of just mostly hemlocks and will result in hardwood regeneration. So that was very nice of them, and they did it in a good way.
Good.
And I was really glad to see the Concom, show up and sort of prevent this from becoming a battle between neighbors, I think it's a good outcome.
I think it was a good process. I'm glad to hear that. And I think, it was good that, the concerns were raised, because it turned out that they had made an error. My understanding is that when they originally did the delineation, they saw a wetland that they thought was isolated, and then realized that it was actually BVW instead of an isolated wetland. And so it, even under the state law, was jurisdictional, whereas originally I think they thought it wasn't. Is that right, Don?
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that they took a second look at it. I know the assistant forester that worked with Andrew He's kind of my opposite number on the other side of DCR. And he did a thorough job. They delineated and they found where the sort of stream that runs through the place was. And yeah, I have no complaints.
Okay, great.
They also won't do, because of that, they won't do the work.
Yeah.
Until probably August when the area is dried up.
Right. Instead of driving skidders through the swamp, they're gonna wait till it dries down in August and then pull the trees out, which
Great.
should work pretty good.
Good. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So what I was going to say, moving on to the Lake Drive discussion is I have not had a chance to finish writing up my site visit form, and I kind of wanted to have it all written up and then distribute it to LWAC as well as to the commissioners before we had our real review of that site visit. And I think we could talk a little bit about it if you'd like, but I'd sort of like us to be able to have the photographs and the notes in front of us to have any kind of really substantive discussion. And I think without Robin here and Beth, I just think that they probably would want to be a part of that because it's an important issue. So, I know there's a bunch of people here tonight. I don't know if there's anybody who wanted to ask any questions or make any comments, either about the Lake Drive site visit or about something else. If you can, feel free to raise your hand if you do want to make a comment. And I know that there's some people who probably whose last names aren't evident. And just for our minutes, if you'd be willing to unmute yourself and just give us your last name so that we can have the proper list in our minutes to reflect who's here. I see Misha, which I think is Anna Mancebo or Michael Stotz. And then I see George. I don't know who George is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm George. George Abdow, 56 North Laurel Drive.
Okay. Hi, George. Thanks for coming. And my understanding, you are the current president of Lake Whale Association.
Yes, but I'm here as a town resident, as a town
Yeah.
property owner and resident, not as a board member.
Does anybody have any comments among the commissioners from the site visit? Is there anything anybody wants to say?
Maybe just an initial observation. It will be good to talk about it more, but I mean, certainly, there's the initial point source, sediment input into the lake issue that is very much, it seems, squarely within the Concom's wheelhouse to talk about that issue and the impacts on the lake. Looking at the rest of all the contributing factors going, all the way up to the sub-watershed, and I'm sure it goes beyond. A question that was going through my head is where is the Concom's authorities lie, and certainly I think it's very clear on the point source into the lake that that's something within our authority. But as we got further and further away, it just seemed like it was getting into a larger issue that's well beyond the buffer zone for the lake, and maybe a little less clear in terms of what those contributing factors are in terms of the impact on the lake. I understand there's certainly a larger impact on stormwater discharge there, and a lot that neighbors and the association have been doing to address. But where that line is, that was just a question going through my head. I know the black and white part of it, but there's a lot of gray there.
I think it was a good meeting, and I'm glad so many people, we were able to gain input from so many different people's perspectives. So that it was a good site visit.
Yeah, no, I learned a great deal, so I appreciated. I appreciated all that contribution, absolutely. And for those folks who weren't there, that's why I want to kind of get this kind of committed. I took notes as we were going and I took photographs and I kind of want to organize it a little better. Just haven't had time to finish all of it with the million things I'm doing. So I will get it out and we can talk about it and put it on the agenda for another meeting. And as you know, as it was made clear by Bob Douglas, he wants to resolve the issue on his property, and that is within his purview. And I did send out the letter that we had discussed at the last meeting. I did send that to him in response to the discussion. So, you know, the next step would be for him to come back to us with a proposal, and possibly an NOI application. And then when we have an NOI before us, the actual proposal, then we can have something concrete that we can talk about.
Maybe one last thought on it. I do think that makes sense in moving that way and in terms of, you know, where, you know, the Concom's, you know, clear authority lies, and addressing that as one issue is good. I really appreciated having all the neighbors there to talk about this. That's because it is a bigger issue, and I think it's not likely that the Conservation Commission is going to be, you know, the entity that's going to solve all those issues. But I think all the right people were there, and you know, and working together. I really appreciated all the neighbors' perspectives at the end, where they were talking a little bit about, you know, trying to find something that worked for everyone. That give me hope that you know, they'll find a better solution, because I do think it's going to involve a whole community there to solve the problem.
Yeah. Just this is kind of rolling into another agenda item. Mary and I were at the last LWAC committee meeting, LWAC meeting on April 16th. And there were some things that came up that I just want to share with the commission, just so they know from that meeting. And, you know, as just a point of order, I would like to maybe suggest that as a regular agenda item, we report out on the LWAC meetings, either if I'm there or if Mary, if you're there, if you could take maybe some brief notes, not minutes, but just highlights to share with the commission, so that we know, you know, just kind of keeping us all on the same page, so we know what this other committee is doing. My understanding is that LWAC is working with FERCog right now on a 319 planning grant, and that is in the works. And also the town is in the process of finalizing an application for the MVP Action Grant Program. And we were asked to give a letter of support by the select board for that application, which is being submitted next week. So sort of at the last minute, I just found out about that yesterday. So I sent a draft letter to everybody. I don't know if you two have had a chance to look at it, but I want to get approval of that letter or revision of it, so I can send it off to the select board for that application. One of the discussions at the LWAC meeting was that they were talking about a beaver dam that's upstream north of Lake Wyola, where in the past there's been a contamination problem where a beaver dam broke and there was huge sediment discharge during a huge flood many years ago, I guess in the 90s, into North Cove. And they decided that they're going to go out and do a site visit to take a look at the beaver dam on that stream. And they're doing it not tomorrow morning, they're doing it on Saturday morning. So I wanted to let the commission know in case any of you wanted to join in on that site visit. I don't know that I'll be doing it. I don't think I will, given everything else I've got going on, but it would be good to have at least one representative from the Concom to take a look at it, because, you know, just to have an understanding of this is a contributing factor to issues on the lake, not necessarily from people's property, but because of this stream. So they're gonna walk up to the Beaver Dam near Fisk Pond. Is anybody interested in joining them?
So I'm gonna try to go. I have some work being done here, but I'm hoping it'll be done at my house before the walk goes. So I plan on going as long as I can.
Right. How about Don, Scott?
Mary, can you shoot me an email for when you're gonna do that, when you're gonna meet them, and I'll see if I can connect up with you guys there.
Okay.
I think there was an email I was sent. I can send it to you, Don.
Yeah,
Please,
then
yeah.
she sent an email finally with actually, I think Mark sent it. So
Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Do you want to go, Scott?
Yeah, let me know when it's gonna be.
I think it's 9 o'clock on Saturday morning.
I thought it was in the afternoon.
Oh, is it the
But let me
afternoon? Okay.
just take a quick
That
look
was
here.
morning.
It looks like Mark Rivers is on this Zoom, so
Yeah,
maybe
he
he
is.
can tell you.
Mark?
Hi, Mark here.
Hi, Mark. When's that visit?
It's at 2 o'clock on Saturday
Okay.
at the Lake Well Association Hall. And then we're gonna walk upstream. Catherine Hilton is actually going to be our tour guide. I've never been up there, and she's going to, there's a number of beaver dams on there, and so the first she came up at Elback was. I get that, this.
Mark, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Is other people having trouble?
I
Yeah.
can hear him, but
So
let me know when it is and
Two-
I'll make it if
Sounds
I
like
can.
it's 2 o'clock.
it's
on
2
Saturday.
o'clock on Saturday and we're gonna meet at the association hall.
Okay,
Okay, do you know where that is, Scott?
I do.
Okay, great. Okay. So that would be great. So I think that was the main thing that I wanted to, and I guess that's a natural segue into this other agenda item, which was a letter of support for the MVP grant application. Have you guys, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to really look at that.
I skimmed it. I thought it looked really good.
I thought it looked good. Do you need a motion to approve?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the letter of support for the MVP grant.
Okay, second. Okay.
I'll
Scott
second.
David,
Aye.
Stefan, I, and Khan.
Aye.
Okay. Next on the list of things to talk about is that we got a request from the Kestrel Trust about the Ames Pond project, where they were asking not to waive the requirement for notifying abutters because it's a very large parcel and they're only doing a limited amount of work within the parcel. And they do have the right to request this under the state regulations. And I guess the question I want to make sure we think about is, there could be other large scale projects. I mean, I'm thinking of a solar project where they may say, well, we're within a huge area and we're only, we're hundreds of feet away from anybody's house, so we don't want to notify abutters. And would we, do we want to set a precedent for waiving abutter notifications? Because even if it's in the state regulations, it's still in our bylaws. So the abutter notification requirements. So I wanted us just to have a discussion about that and how we want to address that waiver request.
Can I ask Miriam what was, and I read it, and I guess the question that went through my head is, I always think it's the best practice would be to notify the abutters, and that's why that would be the standard way of doing things. But I didn't see what was the rationale for not notifying abutters here, or is
Well, they were
I
just,
understand that they were saying that they're interior to a large property, but was there some
that
other
was the
reason?
point, is that they're interior to a large property.
Yeah,
It wasn't
I
that
guess
there were
my,
abutters. It's not that, I don't think there's an extensive number of abutters because it's on the edge of town.
yeah. I guess my initial thought is I think we would want the abutters notified. That seems like it's not a very big ask, and maybe they, would have some input into it. But I agree with you. I think it would be very hard to start to parse out where we're gonna make people notify and where we're not gonna make
Big
people
parcel.
notify.
Yeah, how big a parcel, when would this, yeah. That was my concern, was just kind of having a kind of a consistent approach. Yeah, I'm seeing Frank McGinn has his hand raised. Did you want to make a comment? And Frank, I'm going to let Janice comment first because she's a consultant for us, and then I'll call on you. Janice?
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to preempt Mr. McGinn. I was trying to put up the hand afterwards. I was just thinking, while they may be saying that they're going to be working more or less at the dam to the pond and stuff, it seemed to me that their proposal was involving also adding parking or changing the parking along the road. And that could affect both the the houses right there, but also the people that lived on the side streets if they don't have a large enough parking area or something. So I think it does potentially impact people. It'll bring more people to the area, which, is nice, but it also will have impacts. It'd be nice for the neighbors to have some part of the process and a chance to speak.
Yeah, because it's a public, it's going to be an open to the public property. It's not a private property. It's not somebody who's doing work on their house. Frank McGinn, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I own the path directly across the street from the Kestrel, and I found out about this project by happenstance, and so we would like to be notified. I think that's just as a normal procedure, so everything goes, as I physically own the land across the street, it would be nice to know what's going on.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. And it's helpful to hear from an abutter. I don't think we need to vote. We probably should make, I guess we're not approving this. Nobody's making a motion to approve it. So unless Mary, do you have a feeling about it?
Yeah, I don't see why we should waive it. I do think if we learn nothing from the last track, that, abutters are interested, and skipping them can be a bigger problem when they come later and have questions. So I think it's only fair that abutters should be notified.
Frank, can you lower your hand? Carrie, could you make me a co-host? Yeah, thanks. Okay. On a related topic, just so you know, an issue came up that I became aware of with the way that we've been having people do a abutter notification. So the process that we've been doing, and this is how it was introduced to me when I came on the commission, is that people would make an application. And then when the application was received, the Concom would give the applicant the date and time for the public hearing. And then they would put that information in the abutter notice and in the legal notice in the newspaper with the date and time of the public hearing. So the abutter notifications would happen after the application was submitted. Somebody recently contacted us pointing out that in the language on the notice of intent application from the state, there's an affidavit saying, I swear that I've already noticed the abutters, which of course you can't do. You can't really swear to that if you haven't done it yet. We can't ask people to do it. And I reached out to DEP about this, and they said, well, one alternative would be just to have people submit applications without signing them, which that didn't seem like a very good idea, to not sign applications. The alternative is that we change our procedure and have people submit the abutter notices before they submit the application. And then the abutter notices would not have the date and time of the public hearing, but would have information about how they could access that information. We would have the information about how you would get to the town calendar. I just wanted to be kind of sort of clear with people about whether that's what people think is the best way to go. And as we've talked about in recent meetings, there's also this little complicating factor, which with the butter notifications, that they have to be by certified mail with return receipts, because that's right now how our bylaw regulations are written. And the bylaw requires that people send a copy of the plan to abutters, but town council thought it was sufficient as long as we tell abutters how they can access the plans. We don't have to actually mail the plans. So having it on the website where it's publicly available, letting people know that they can contact town hall to get a hard copy if they want, would be sufficient and in the notice. So discuss. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds reasonable to me.
Ask Janice about this.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with that either.
Janice, and most commissions have the notifications happen before the NOI is submitted.
Not in the two towns that I worked on. It's like, you guys are discovering all new things, reading the fine lines, had no idea. But I did tell Miriam that some of the consultants would submit a notice of intent signed and with all the documentation, how they sent out this very generic notice to abutters.
Right.
That would be, go to the Concom website or whatever and find, the date and time of the hearing. And so I always wondered, why did they do that? Because it was annoying, because we had our own form where we said, this is when you can reach the Concom. It's only 2 days a week, that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what we
Yeah,
do. We have a
yeah.
very detailed abutter notification template, which is on the website, and we give it to applicants.
Yeah, yeah.
It's useful. I think that the problem is if we don't give people the exact time and date of the public hearing, then it means the abutters have to keep checking the website
Yes.
to find out when the public hearing is. And I feel like that's putting them at a disadvantage rather than just telling them straight out, this is when the public hearing is.
Yeah, I don't know how you get around it unless you sent out just a regular mail letter with the details, after the NOI has been submitted, that the Concom covers it, I guess. It's extra work for you, but if you feel like that's important for the abutters to know the specifics, then you just send some regular mail as just informational, not as the legal requirement. I don't know.
Well, and that's we've kept our fees low because we're assuming that the applicants are shouldering the mailing costs for the
Yes.
abutter notices. A lot of conservation commissions do those notices themselves, but they charge higher fees
Mhm.
because they have to pay, cover the cost of postage, which is expensive for certified mail. It's costly. It can be like $100 or more
Yeah.
for one project.
But I mean, you could send out just a regular first class mail letter as just the Concom update, not as the legal certified mail notice that the applicant has to do. I don't know. I guess you have to think about it some more, but I guess if you want to be legal, then you have to. I think it's important to have the applicant sign. That seems like that's a legal document
You
for
think
it to
that
be a
we should
complete,
sign it?
form. It has to be signed.
All
I
right.
think you have a hand again.
Yeah, I see. Tom Seifert.
Hi, thanks, Miriam. Yeah, this is Tom Seifert. I appreciate it. May I speak for just a minute about what I just heard?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, because I think a lot of these issues might have come up possibly on many actions, but I know it came up, some of these issues with something with me and my neighbor several months ago. May I just throw out there as possibilities, 2 required notices from applicants, one upon, before applying, and then one when the date is set. Would this really be an undue stress on the applicant? And could this really just be one notice stretched over 2 periods of time? Because obviously the date of the meeting can't be known in advance, but why not just continue having the applicant have that burden of telling the abutters when the meeting is, and it might mean 2 different notices from the applicant. I thought also, as another point, that the applicant was allowed to deliver the notices by hand as well, like instead of by certified mail.
Under the bylaw, they can hand deliver them, or they can do it by certified mail, but they cannot do it by certificates of mailing.
But can
Actually,
they always
I
hand
don't know if
deliver?
they can under the, I'm not sure. I can't remember without checking, but
I guess I'm asking whether hand delivery is always an option.
I'm actually,
because-
I'm not sure. Again, I have to go check with the bylaw again. So the issue,
Because if it
Tom,
were, that spares any costs,
yes,
technically.
the issue was that the bylaw has a different requirement than the state law.
Right, and I think you might have said the bylaw requires a plan being sent, but that the town council thought that there was a way of describing things and whatnot. I think the abutters and all the citizens would appreciate knowing exactly that determination, because I know I expected a plan in my notification and it didn't
Yes.
arrive. And
Right.
it was not how I read things. So maybe that, I don't know if that would actually mean a change in the wording of the bylaw. And what about the idea of just increasing fees? I believe when my neighbor made an application, their fee was actually waived, if I'm not mistaken, in the history that I saw of their application. So why waive fees ever? And why not raise fees if it helps?
Carrie, I see you have your
Thank
hand
you.
raised, Carrie. Thank you.
I just had a question just because when I'm putting together files, I know one of the checklist items is like verifying that the abutters received the notice. So I was just wondering if they were hand delivered, how would I know that they did receive them, if that
So,
makes sense?
Carrie, if it's hand delivered, there is a certificate, an affidavit that the applicant has to sign saying that they hand delivered them and who they hand delivered them to.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So I don't think we can make a decision about this right now. I think that we probably want to table this for further discussion. I guess I'm not going to change our procedure for now until we have some more clarity about how we want to proceed. Because I know that many other commissions, I did a kind of a quick look at other commissions, and many other commissions have a template that requires putting in the date and time of the public hearing, which means obviously you have to wait. Well, not obviously. So if somebody calls us ahead of time and says, I'm going to submit a notice of intent, can you give me a public hearing date time? That's great. Then we can give it to them and they can do those notifications early. But if they don't give us advance notice, and sometimes that happens where we just get a notice of intent submitted and we haven't had any prior communication with that applicant, then we wouldn't be able to do that. And it would end up having to be given to them after the submission. So let's just table this and we'll carry it on. We'll have further discussion about it. So there's just a few more items I wanted to make sure we went over. One was that I forwarded to everybody. Carrie was doing some, I think, beginning to look in Town Hall, Old Town Hall, for the land grant application. I had asked her to do some research about the original 1965 self-help grant application, and she contacted the Division of Conservation Services. Carrie, was that an email or a phone call?
That was a phone call that I did with Grace, because she was helping me kind of direct, like, how
So
should I face the questioning?
So I just want to be very clear that they did that without consulting with me, because I just want to remind everyone that we were advised by town council not to reach out to the Division of Conservation Services until we had gotten more resolution about the disposition of the Town Beach boat launch. And as a result of Carrie doing that, I'm not meaning to throw you under the bus, Carrie. I just want to be clear to everybody what happened. I did get contacted by Melissa Cryan, the director of the Division of Grant Management, wanting to know where we're at with the boat launch issue. So I didn't initiate that. But what was interesting was the applications, the original 1965 application, does reference the Conservation Commission and does reference the idea that the property was going to be used for both conservation and recreation. It doesn't say active or passive. It didn't break it down that way. After they sent that to us, I asked them if they could give us any information about what the terms of the grants were at the time when this particular application was granted in 1965. And they said they don't have that information, but they did direct me to go back and look at the statute and the regulations that are currently in place, which was interesting because what I noticed, the statute hasn't changed. It's the same statute that was in place in 1965. And it has the language development of natural resources. So it's giving the authority of the state to give funds to towns for the development of natural resources. And I don't know if you remember in that November 17th meeting, town council had called attention to that language, development of natural resources, which was in the warrant article where the town voted for the grant, to approve the grant application and the land acquisition. That was really just taken out of the statute. That's where that language came from. It wasn't something that the town had thought up. But I did notice in the regulations, the current regulations, that there is a requirement for post-grant compliance. And there's a provision in the regulation that says that you have to remain in compliance with, after you've been given a grant, the property land use has to remain in compliance with whatever the regulations are at the time, the current time. And that any changes in use have to be approved by the state, which was kind of what we had been discussing. So at some, I think we'll package this up and we'll need to revisit this with town council and with the select board. Carrie.
Sorry, just another quick question. So Grace had briefly told me about that, and my apologies, I did not know that that was going to happen. I just simply thought the phone call would hopefully get me to the application, which I mean, it did, but it did cause a ruckus, and I apologize. I had no
That's
idea
okay.
that would happen.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Really don't worry.
So from what I heard from that situation, Grace had told me that the boat launch was already in place before the grant. Is that true?
No.
No,
Okay. I didn't think so once after you'd started discussing it, but I thought I would ask.
And just to be clear, Carrie, we're not talking about the year 2000 land acquisition. We're talking about the 1965 one, because there were two parcels of land, and the boat launch, the property where the boat launch is, was purchased in 1965. And then in 1966 or 67 is when they put in the boat launch. So the other thing that was interesting was that they did send me also the application from 1966. I had forgotten that there was another self-help grant in 1966 to purchase the dam and the water rights to Lake Wyola. And the grant application says it was being purchased by the Conservation Commission to be under the supervision and direction of the Conservation Commission. So, and I believe the deed for that, that purchase has the Conservation Commission on it.
good. For those that were saying that the Concom is not involved in those open space grant properties.
The other thing about the regulations is that they do say that the deeds need to include the preservation restriction, the conservation restriction has to be in the deed. And that is not the case for that parcel for the boat launch, the Town Beach. I think it's B800 or whatever, that parcel, the deed for it does all the deed shows is that it was purchased by the town, but there's no conservation restriction on it. The Division of Conservation Services wanted the town to put an attached conservation restriction on the deed. And that was never done. That was my advice to the select board. And town council had advised against doing that at this point, but that's still outstanding, that Division of Conservation Services is saying that to be in compliance with the regulations, there would need to be a conservation restriction on it. Go ahead, Don.
I just wanted to let you guys know that there's been some discussion at DCR about Division of Fish and Wildlife wanting to take over that ramp that DCR currently patrols during summertime. There is DCR land on one side of the lake, and they consider that state park, state forest. But then the access on the other side of the lake, the town beach area, the boat ramp, they also consider access to their state forest and state park. So they want to be included in the conversation too. And they're a little upset about Division of Fish and Wildlife suggesting that they take over the maintenance of the boat ramp. And there was even some talk about what the status of Southbrook Conservation Area was as far as DCR state forest land. Anyways, I'm trying to follow up on it and get you guys an official letter from these folks that run this complex of like 3 different parks. Hopefully I can get you guys something in the mail.
The last that I heard was the Division of Conservation Services informed DFW that they couldn't take over that property because of its status under the self-help grant, under the land grant program. And that was the last that I heard about that. I think it's sort of been put on hold because of.
Yeah. All I heard was that DCR was saying they would like to improve the boat ramp and treat it like more of the state park. And I mean, I didn't want to butt into the conversation. It was my superiors, so I listened.
Somebody, do you have a contact on that you can give me?
I'll email you guys the contact for this little meeting that they had, these supervisors, and you guys can communicate with them and see what they're talking about.
Well, if you do that, I'll reach out to them and try to
Okay.
Loop them into this, what this discussion has been. Janice?
That is very interesting, Don, very interesting. I just wanted to let you know that this is not the only strange and odd situation from back in the 60s. And when I worked in South Hadley, we had a self-help grant that purchased land for a landfill as well as for a conservation area. And it said it was 101 acres plus or minus, and that about 70 or 80 acres would be landfill and the other 20 or whatever would be conservation. And we had to get everybody up and down the ladder from DCS and DCR on board, and everybody sat together in a meeting and decided what they were going to consider. And we split it up, and you had to put in boundary lines between those different pieces because one had restrictions and the other didn't. But it was a giant mess, but it was also from the mid 60s. So in the beginning, they were very, flexible.
They were flexible. So yeah, I mean, what the last conversation I had about this with Donna McNichol was that her recommendation was that we research this and then look at possibly taking Randall Road and the boat launch out of the town beach conservation area in a formal way with DCS, taking it out of that Article 90, is it Article 91 status? Is that what it is? Article 91?
97, I think.
Or Article 97 status. Not the whole parcel, but just that part of it, because it is inconsistent with the regulations for passive recreation. Boat launch wouldn't meet those criteria, but we're not talking about tearing the boat launch out, but it might be that there need to be some change made, because right now we're in this limbo. We're in limbo around this. Okay, so interesting stuff. Just wanted to let you know. And, I don't feel badly about it, Carrie, because you didn't know what the recommendation had been. And I think there's nothing wrong with, asking a state official for information, and it yielded some helpful information. We wanted that copy of the original application, and now we have it. So, which I forwarded to everybody. So.
Hey, it wasn't a total loss. I
It's
guess.
okay. Absolutely okay. But sometimes being at a total loss is a good thing, because you'll just do what makes the most sense without worrying about it. And that's a good thing. Okay. So moving on. I think the next thing that I have on my agenda, our agenda, is follow up to the culverts on Cole's property. And I think I forwarded emails to people, did I, or not, what the response was from Shane Bonocci. And Emily Stockman gave us recommendations of what to ask Coles to produce, because her recommendation was that they produce some evidence that these are exempt culverts because they pre-existed the Wetlands Protection Act. They're saying that they have old maps that show them. So she's saying they should give us copies, or, a file with those pictures of those maps to show that they pre-existed.
Good.
And I was.
Thank you for sending that. I read through it, and that seems like a good way forward. So I guess we'll stay tuned to.
Yes. But so she was right. They are new culverts. The question is, were they in existence before? Our next item was Locks Pond culvert replacement. I emailed Becky Torres because nobody came back to us with a revised construction schedule to approve. She said that she's been told the construction is going to happen in August. So, because probably they're going to want to do it during the dry period. They'll have to come back to us to get the construction schedule approved.
Yeah, and again, the recommendation was do it after Labor Day. People don't take their boats out of the water till after Labor Day. So just when it comes, we'll see.
There was the enforcement order that we had for January Hills Road, and you may recall that they were had asked for an extension in the deadline to produce driveway repair, and I followed up and sent them an email asking them where that stood, and they said they're working on it and are going to be getting back to us with a new design. So that's pending. The next item was Highway Department road maintenance coordination and permitting. I had a conversation with Rita Farrell about, what should be the next steps in this process around an NOI. And she didn't think it was realistic for anybody to be thinking about doing anything before town meeting. At this stage in the game, it's just things are too busy for the town. But I thought that we need to decide what we want to do to follow up on our request for an NOI.
So just, are you wondering about timing for that, Miriam, or is it a follow-up conversation meeting with Highway Department and town administrator? Or, is that what you're trying to figure out as next steps or timing or both?
I think we need to, well, I think timing is that, you know, we can make any request we want between now and May 21st, but it's not going to be helpful because they're not going to be able to do anything in this short period of time. But I think we should be thinking about what our next steps are, what we want to move this process along.
Would it be good to have, are you thinking, maybe it's you know, we've talked about a letter to the highway department and sending that to the highway department, select board, town, and the town administrator here after town meeting to lay out, I think I think we had drafted something before to lay out what those next steps would be and a timeline to accomplish it. Is that what you're thinking?
We gave them, I think we did send them an email with a timeline. And then the response was that they wanted to wait till April or May because they were busy.
Right,
And now we're going to be looking at June.
right.
So I think
is it
I think we need to figure out when would we like to see this happen? I mean, I would like to see it happen in 2022 that a permit gets.
Well,
complete.
and that's why I'm thinking is we could follow up on what we've already sent to them. And, you know, with some dates being after town meeting, like in June would seem reasonable that they can put town meeting behind them and then we could focus on this to try to accomplish it here in 2022.
Well, I'm wondering whether we want to try and have another select board meeting.
Sure. I mean, that if you think I'm just trying to think that through. If there's additional information, to me, it seems like it's a resharing of what we've already shared. And so if it was that, what I understood is that they were just worried about the timing. So if it's just trying to prod them to move forward on the timing, I would think another note now to set that up for after town meeting would be the next step. But if we want to set up a meeting, I'm good with that too.
Yeah, my thought would be asking the select board to take some action and direct the process to begin.
Yeah, either way, I'm good doing it. I like doing it in writing because it's clear and there's it's open to interpretation, but I'm good having a meeting as well.
Well, we know.
Yeah, I think a letter to notify them for a date rather than go to the whole meeting at this point,
Yeah, we know
Could they give us a date for us to do it,
Meetings can go sideways,
Yes.
can go off the rails, and then it gets confusing what the purpose of the meeting was for in the first place. I think that keeping kind of the clear focus would be helpful. I know that, this is just an observation that there's a lot of different compartments of town government that are talking about the same thing in this kind of somewhat fragmented way, which, LWAC is talking a lot about stormwater issues on the lake. The planning board is tasked right now with writing this MVP grant, which deals with stormwater townwide and climate resilience. We've been talking about road maintenance and wetland protection and stormwater issues. The highway department has its own mission and tasks involved. So there's just like all these different pieces. And, it's kind of like whose turf is it? Whose lane is, what part of it belongs to which compartment of town government is kind of,
if you can
Interesting
communicate to the
issue.
select board some very specific action items that are related to stormwater that ties in the DPW's work projects. I think that's like a simple first step. Like, don't go beyond that, but just like try to just get them on the same page as you.
I guess what
It's
I was
just a
trying to say,
suggestion.
what I guess I was trying to say is that when there's all these larger kind of planning activities going on, it's easy for people to say, oh, the MVP grant is going to deal with that. So there's no urgency right now. We're going to wait and see if we get the grant, or, oh, it's going to be the planning grant from FERCog that's going to deal with that. So we should just hold off 2 or 3 years until we get that in place. So, and that's fine. I mean, I understand that those grants take a while, and that's great that they're being applied for. I think it's wonderful that people are moving on those things. I just think that there's also the piece that we own, which is our jurisdiction around road maintenance that affects wetlands. And
And I
that's,
do think we need to move forward on that in the interim, whether we get all these grants or not, and whether
yes,
we decide what to do. I think this is a now, what are we doing now scenario.
right.
Maybe
And-
it'll change in the future, but what are we gonna do?
Yeah, I
Right.
agree. Okay,
And we're trying to help the town here comply with the Wetlands Protection Act and our own bylaws. So I think,
well, I can draft, I can send an email to this, or a letter to the select board. What would be a good target date of what we want? I mean, let's break it down into what we're looking for deliverables. We want a plan, maybe we want to maybe form a subcommittee to work on the draft. The draft NOI, would you want to do that? Do you want to just say, we want to see a draft NOI by a certain date?
I don't think you should do the NOI at all. I know the Concom was going through that before. It's an endless loop. It becomes your responsibility. It's their responsibility, and you're the ones that are going to have to review it. So it
It's a
seemed like a
conflict.
conflict
It's
of
a
interest.
conflict. It is a
Yeah.
conflict.
It's their responsibility. Other towns have to do it. They
Mm.
should have to do it.
Right. They can work with DEP, or they can hire somebody to
Right.
help them with it.
yeah,
And we have some
I-
examples, and DEP has had examples before of what other town highway departments have done. So you
Yeah.
could supply them with that.
Do you
Sorry,
agree?
Scott.
Okay, subcommittee also just gives people permission to kind of sometimes kick it down the road and defer. All right,
Yeah, I think we should just pick a date. We'd like to see a draft NOI by June 15th, July 15th, pick a date, and then if we have to push
let's say July 15th.
July 15th.
You know,
Yeah,
a couple
I mean, let's
months-
just,
couple months
throw it
out.
out there, and then we'll work with whatever we get.
Now, I know that Tim Hunting is retiring, and then there's gonna be a new head of DPW taking over. And they may say that they want to get a new person on board before they want.
do they have a date for that? Miriam, have they announced?
Isn't it
that?
June? Somebody said June, I don't know. Does anybody
Yeah,
know?
I like what Mary's proposal for July 15th, and it gives us a place to start. I think we're looking for substantive progress on trying to get this done. So,
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we're kind of running on coming up on the end of what I have on the agenda. I think we've covered everything. We need to think about if we want to schedule some more mapping time. Maybe finish Montague Road, the Montague Road mapping. I don't know if you guys want to hold off doing that. I can't do it for the next few weeks.
I think it would be, I heard a little bit that what has been done is working. It would just be good to know if the work that we've done to date, if there's any modification that we need to make, or if that seemed to be using the art collector seemed to be the best way forward.
Well, I
So-
did my own, waypoints with my GPS, and I was able to upload them into a map into GIS. And I think Beth did her own, so I thought at some point we'd compare notes, compare
It
maps.
would be nice to see those, I think, and so we can decide before we start doing it. Did it get us what we want, and which map are we gonna use, or how we're gonna
Yeah.
utilize that?
So Beth's not here tonight, so let's table that. We've got a very busy agenda at the next meeting on May 12th, because there's the Montague Carver public hearing. And then at 9 o'clock, we've got the geothermal energy system for 64 Cushman Road. Janice, you have your hand raised.
Um,
Oh, you there? You're muted, Janice.
Sorry. One of the things at the bottom of my agenda page was approve revised TPR proposal for Stockman Associates.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know where
And
that-
also proposals for consultant for bylaw
Oh
regulations.
my God, the two most important things tonight. Almost- Oh my God.
Well, you've got so many things to choose from.
I know, we sure do. Okay. Thank you. So first on the agenda is that Emily Stockman is going to be going out on a site visit on May 5th, I think is what the email said, with TRC to do the delineation work along that northern boundary, and to also look at a couple of isolated wetlands. And so she needed us to approve a new proposal with her with additional funds. So I wanted to vote on that tonight, and also see if any commissioners want to go on that site visit.
So I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for Emily to do the work.
Okay, second.
Second,
Okay, David,
Aye.
Stefan, I, Con.
hi.
It's easy tonight.
Yeah, I can't go May 5th, with them, but so for me, that's a no. I won't be in town.
Yeah. Scott, you're working.
I'm actually out of town then too.
Don's not allowed. Janice, do you want to go?
I would, but Thursdays are the day that is my busiest day with
Okay.
my other commitments, so no.
All right, well, we'll hear more at the next meeting. So I will sign that proposal and send it off to Emily. And they're getting a check that will be, I guess, getting delivered tomorrow, Carrie. So whenever it arrives, it will just get deposited when you come in the office next week. The next issue I wanted to have us discuss was the proposal for a consultant for the bylaw work. And I wanted to get some input from you, whether you guys feel like you're at a stage right now where we can vote on an applicant, whether you feel like you need more information.
I think we should be able to look at it and vote on the applicant.
I sent.
I don't know how Scott feels, but
Yeah, I haven't had time to review the proposals that you sent this morning in any detail. I did skim them and they were pretty high level. You've been doing so much work on this, Miriam. I really trust, what you think in terms of a recommendation. It seemed like, the folks that we had met here before certainly are experts in the field, and it seemed like they could give us some really good guidance. So I'm supportive of moving forward if that's kind of where you've gotten to.
Yeah, I looked at their agreement too, and I agreed I mean, I'm ready to move forward with the recommendation.
Do you want me to pull up that proposal and look at it, since you haven't had a chance to look at it? We can go over the scope. and we can-
Sure, yeah, I mean, maybe just hitting on the,
Okay, let me open them. Hold on one sec. I think I can do that pretty quickly if you give me one sec. All right, so first is the scope, which is right here. So let me open that up. Let's look at that first. I'll share it. Okay. So this was the most, can you guys see this?
yep,
This was the most recent revision, and I revised it in part with some feedback that I received from Pat Garner about sort of refining the language. So Shutesbury Conservation Commission aims to develop policies and revise the protection bylaw regulations in order to bring current regulatory practice into conformity with the enumerated protected resource areas in our bylaw and current regulatory best practices. So again, we're not changing the bylaw, we're looking to change the regulations that inform how we apply the bylaw. And then I have the background here that the bylaw was adopted. Actually, I know, Janice, you said it was adopted in '87. That's correct, right? Is that wrong, Janice, the date? She there?
she's
Janice,
on,
you're muted.
on mute. But she may have stepped away. I'm not.
Sorry, no, I was just stupid with the muting again. Somewhere in here, I have that yellowed piece of paper, which has the 1987 date on it that I had typed on the top of a copy after it had been approved at town meeting. So I don't know what the 1990 is. It was,
It was on the, I think it was on the actual bylaw document that we have on the website. But
So-
if you could give me that date, I'll just correct it. Just so we have it's not really that important, but anyway, okay. So
Yeah.
the regulations were adopted in 2000. They're over 20 years old and are out of date. Then I call attention to section 2 here about subsurface streams. And that they're not defined in the regulations, and we seek to revise the regulations to include scientifically based definitions, delineation methods, and protection standards. The project description, the vendor will consult with us and research literature, and the deliverables will be preliminary applicant guidance for an RDA, notices of intent or ANRADs, draft regulations for the definitions, delineation methods, standards for development, evaluating development impacts. Standards should include threshold identification levels, cumulative impacts to resource, and exemptions, if any. That they would attend meetings and public hearings and provide feedback on draft documents and testify. That they'll be an independent contractor. This was the breakdown of hours that we were considering. Everybody see that? And a timetable for when we wanted to complete this process, with the idea being that we would hopefully be able to draft and approve the regulations maybe by early fall. Ideally by early fall. Okay, and that they would have to provide liability insurance, blah, blah, blah. So that's that. Any questions about that piece?
Nope, not for me.
Okay, let me pull up the consulting agreement, which is right here. Give me one sec. Trying to find it. Here it is. Most of this is pretty standard stuff. Can you see this? Everybody see it? So I think the plan is that Pat Garner would consult with that contract with us, and Scott Horsley would be a subcontractor. So we're just contracting with one party. So the scope, yeah, the contract references the scope that I just shared with you. The term of the contract would be to December 31st. Compensation, not to exceed $5,000. Won't go beyond that maximum without prior approval. Invoicing, blah, blah, blah. And then their capacity as an independent contractor is just making it clear that they are not a salaried employee, that we're purchasing services from them. There's a typo, consultants. That's weird. Hold on, I got it. Okay. And then indemnification clauses. They didn't have any problem with the indemnification clauses. Just so you know, I got this language from back in 2021. The Historical Commission was in the process of hiring a consultant, and we had talked with town council to get suggested language for indemnification, and this was the language that had been recommended. So I just took that language out of the information that had been given to us, and then the town council wanted a non-discrimination clause put in, and then everybody signs.
Has town council, they haven't reviewed this draft though, have they?
No.
Would that be standard that they would, Miriam, before we?
Well, you know, Scott, we've been signing contracts with Emily Stockman that were 1 page long with none of this. So, you know, it's within our purview to hire consultants. I really am just including this out of an abundance of caution. I personally don't think we need to do that, but.
What's the status of the additional funds that were requested from the town?
It was
to help?
approved.
Yeah, and so does that mean it's available now, immediately, or whatever?
think
Okay,
so.
good. Okay,
I have to double check with the finance committee, but I made it clear that we needed it for this fiscal year because we were going to begin the work this fiscal year.
okay.
So
And how much?
maybe they can divide it up in half of it for this fiscal year and half for
Uh-huh.
the next fiscal year.
How much was that they,
5,000.
okay, and that's what this contract says at this point? Okay, and we'll do backup if we need to for more.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
We have a
So do you
fund-
just need a motion to accept the consulting agreement?
Yeah, I just was, there was just the question about where the money, so we do have an extra $2,500 in our own fee account.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it looks good.
I think most consultants work in a much less formal way than this for Comcoms is my impression. Because, you know, people are consultants and they're vendors, so, you know, people purchase their services on an hourly basis or for certain projects, like for third-party review. I felt like, I thought that of the three people that I spoke with, I thought that Scott Horsley and Pat Garner seemed to have the best skill set for developing some regulatory language for us.
I agree. So
Yeah,
I can make a motion that we accept the consulting agreement with Patrick Gardner.
I'd second.
David,
Aye.
I voted for you. I'm sorry.
Thank
David.
you. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, David. I'm tired. Stefan, I,
Aye.
okay,
Can I count as two people then?
what? Yeah, okay, all right. We'll get the ball rolling.
Yay.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. So we got those two taken care of. Anything else we've missed?
I hear Janice is shuffling just to make sure she's looking
Yeah.
at the agenda.
I don't see it. I don't
Yeah.
see anything.
I was looking at mine too. I don't see anything. I think we hit everything.
Okay. And I know, no comments from the public. I know there's some other people here. Okay, so we did get an updated map from Maria Furstenberg from TRC, which I noticed did not have topography on the large locust map. And I emailed her about that because I'd asked her for that way back, saying that we really wanted topography on those maps, and she was going to get it for us. So I'm going to email her again because we want to have it in time for the May 12th meeting. So she's got to send us updated maps after she does the site visit with Emily. And she's going to give us that topography on that. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, I'm all done. So we're meeting on May 12th. We've got two public hearings. Unfortunately, the second one is going to be at 9 o'clock at night. You know, I'm hoping that'll be straightforward, and maybe we can even issue the order of conditions that night. But I'd really like to encourage you to take a good look at the application, look at the packet and the site plans. Unfortunately, it's come in a couple of different pieces. So the initial site plan was submitted, and then the applicant has given us some additional information. But one of the things he wanted was to ask the commission to waive the requirement for an engineered plan. We can't approve that waiver until we're in the public hearing. So even though he's made that request, we would have to open the public hearing and then make a decision whether or not we're going to waive that requirement. So we can't do that tonight.
And which plan is that for again?
64 Cushman Road is for the geothermal
Yep. Okay.
system. And the landowner's just doing the NOI by himself. He got wetland delineation, but he's basically put the packet together himself. And so, you know, he's asking for that, a waiver of that requirement. We'll talk about that when we open the public hearing. Sound good?
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah. And all right. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn
At 8:40 tonight.
at 8:40.
Yep, second.
Second.
Scott, okay. David.
Aye.
Devon, aye.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you.
Ooh, good night.
Good.